Well, Uncharted is another in a long line of video game to movie adaptations. But how does this movie work for someone who's never played the games? Well, stick around and I'll share my thoughts. At least I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. This is my uncut review of Uncharted. The synopsis on IMDb reads, street smart Nathan Drake, played by Tom Holland, is recruited by seasoned treasure hunter Victor Sully Sullivan, played by Mark Wahlberg, to recover a fortune amassed by Ferdinand Magellan and lost 500 years ago by the House of Moncada. What starts as a heist job for the duo becomes a globe-trotting, white-knuckle race to reach the prize before the ruthless Santiago Moncada, played by Antonio Banderas, who believes he and his family are the rightful heirs. If Nate and Sully can decipher the clues and solve one of the world's oldest mysteries, they stand to find $5 billion in treasure and perhaps even Nate's long-lost brother. But only if they can learn to work together. All right. Guys, I hate doing negative reviews. But I don't have time this week to watch another movie that I might be able to give a positive review for. This is all I have time for. I got to have movie review or something content on Fridays. That's kind of a thing that I set for myself. So I'm going to give you my thoughts on this one. I would describe it. I'm still going to try and help it find its audience. I am not its audience, and I'll explain why. But I think it has. I think it did well in the box office, so I think it certainly has an audience. Anyway, it's a light, furrowed brow adventure where there's actors that are furrowing their brows, and so you know that the characters are concentrating and they're supposed to be, in terms of the plot, having a tense moment. But that's about as far as it goes, in terms of the performances. It doesn't really fully lean into the kind of weight and tension that I want to see or feel in order to have concern for any of these characters that are supposedly in peril. I just didn't feel any of that throughout the entire movie. And I could tell how this movie was going to feel based on the very first opening sequence, which is parts of it are in the trailer. It involves being up in a plane and the hero trying to scramble back into the plane as they're hanging on to things that are hanging out of the plane and stuff. And it just, that scene just set the tone for the entire movie. And unfortunately, I was like, oh crap, maybe I should have realized then, find something else to review. But nevertheless, I'd already paid the money, so I went ahead. But the movie goes from one green screen and CG-filled predicament to the next with unrealistic physics and impossibly lucky outcomes. I'm guessing it's quote-unquote fun for many other viewers. I can almost hear a certain type of viewer saying, oh, Peter, it's just fun. It's just popcorn fun, that kind of thing. But for me, fun in this genre is a combination of genuinely felt peril that is offset by comic relief, that is actually providing relief because there's actually some tension that I am feeling. So this had lots of comic quote-unquote relief, but there was no relief necessary for me because I didn't feel an ounce of tension the whole time. The summary of my feelings throughout Uncharted would be, it all looks fake and everybody's going to be just fine, As far as the cast goes, whether due to actor skill or tonal choice of the director, I suspect the latter is the case. It's just a tonal choice that, there's lots of movies that choose this tone. And so I think it is intentional, not because of a lack of ability on the part of either the actors or the director. But I never felt the heroes sweating. I don't even think I saw them sweating. I seem to remember Harrison Ford feeling much more vulnerable and in duress in Raiders of the Lost Ark and the Temple of Doom. I definitely have memories where his skin is glistening because he is strained and sweating. Maybe partly because he was in a hot environment, but even so, I just sensed the stress on his human limitations more in those movies than I ever did in this movie. But maybe those are rose-tinted memories. I haven't seen those in a long time. That's just how I seem to remember them, and what I would have preferred would have been the case more in this movie. The script here lends itself to jokes and a lack of tension, so some of that can be put on the script, but I think there's still plenty of room outside of the written dialogue for the performances to create tension and vulnerability that either the actors, the director, or both couldn't or wouldn't prioritize. I did get one good laugh and one good chuckle, and they both came from Mark Wahlberg. And I think that in both cases had to do, I think it had to do more with his delivery than actually what he was saying or what he was doing. And that's pretty good given my seemingly cold, dead heart compared to so many other people and what makes them laugh. But the rest of the jokes all really fell flat for me. Stunts and visuals. There is so much CG actor replacement instead of stunt work in this movie. There was even one where like this guy jumps onto the deck of a boat. I won't give more details than that. And it wasn't a super high crazy jump, but for some reason he was CG. I mean, my eye is cursed. A lot of people aren't going to pick this stuff out. I don't consider it something that I'm bragging about. I'm cursed. I would genuinely love to watch movies and not be able to detect CG, but for some reason my eyes are cursed to pick it out. And for some reason they had this actor replaced with CG for a relatively short drop. And then he was human again, when he landed. There's that moment of transition. Anyway. And there was stuff like that all over the place with Tom Holland, with other characters. And I think also my eyes just pick out green screen more easily these days. Because I don't think this was particularly substandard green screen work, but I just see in the background, I was like, there's something that doesn't quite match. Like they don't feel quite there in that environment. And there's so much green screen in this movie. And it's not the kind of movie that you would expect a lot of green screen in necessarily. If it was in space or some fantasy world, then I would expect that, and I think maybe be a little bit more okay with it. But this is in our world, and in places that theoretically we could go and be, but there's still a lot of green screen going on. I think that the novelty of taking a property from video games to a movie is that it becomes more real. It becomes more tangible when it makes that transition. That would seem to be the benefit of why you would want to do that. But many action shots contain moments, albeit brief, that struck me actually as something we'll be able to see soon in video games. They didn't look all crazily that far removed from what we can see in video games. So really disappointing on that front. As far as themes, I always try to ask, is there anything of moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance going on in the themes of this thing that might trigger some worthwhile thought or conversation? As I've said a number of times before, those themes tend to not pop out for me when I'm having an experience that I don't enjoy. They tend to stand out, I think, more when I am really engaged in the way that the filmmakers want me to be. So I'd really have to stretch and search. I think... I did kind of wonder at one point, it's interesting how there are certain types of movies like Ocean's 11 and like this where theft is trivialized and we just kind of laugh about it. Maybe it's because there's a sense in which they're robbing from people that don't need the money, they'll be just fine, sort of that Robin Hood type of attitude maybe. I just found it interesting as I reflected and my mind wandered, frankly, it's funny how there's this whole thing in movies where we trivialize theft and we get on the side of the thieves and, they're just good old boys and it's just all in good fun and stuff. And I'm not saying that, we should actually change our feelings about these kinds of movies. My mind wandered to that thought. I was like, that's interesting, because we don't have movies where, at least that come to mind right now, where murder is trivialized, like assassins maybe there's something somewhere where it's probably trivialized a little bit, but I don't know. Anyway, maybe there's something there you could chase. There's a moral about one character starting out caring a lot more about money and eventually having kind of a shift in their character, kind of like the Han Solo, thing. I don't know. I'm reaching, guys. I'm really reaching. I have no idea what your tastes are on movies, but if I were a time traveler, you can bet I would go back in time and say, Peter, skip. This is just not for you. In fact, partway through the movie, you've been playing Mad Max on PS4 again recently and watched, Fury Road. And so while you're watching Uncharted, you're actually going to pull out your phone and order the trilogy of the original Mad Max movies. That's how engaged you're going to be with this one. Instead, just order the Mad Max movies and don't watch Uncharted. And look forward maybe to some movie watching you'll actually enjoy this weekend. That you don't tend to like movies generally in this genre. In fact, you're also, when you watch this one, going to open up IMDb and look at a list of 200 other movies like Indiana Jones that, would be kind of like this one. And you didn't really find any that were actually in the vein of this movie that you've liked. So it's probably just not your kind of movie to begin with. It's a flavor of movie plenty of others may like, but Peter, it is not for you at all. This one's rated PG-13 for violence, action, and language. And those are all of my thoughts on Uncharted. I would love to get your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. Are you a fan of the games? What did you think of this? Did it scratch the itches you wanted if you're a fan of the games? Or whatever thoughts you might have. Please like, share, subscribe, and click that bell to stay connected. And I do want to thank the Spirit Blade Insiders for making this review possible. You can get the info about the benefits of being an insider at patreon.com/SpiritBlade Productions. I'm just limping through the script at this point. Then I hope you'll check out our podcast and stay connected to all CGC content over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. Summer insanity.
Liberate butter.